On Friday the 26th of November, the World Chess Championship final takes place in Dubai between Magnus Carlsen, world champion, and the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi. You can see that Carlsen has always had a higher rating than Nepomniachtchi. 2882 is his peak rating. And in fact, Nepomniachtchi has never been over 2800. However, Nepomniachtchi is a difficult opponent for Carlsen. Let's look at their previous encounters. In fact, in classical chess, that's normal tournament chess with a proper slow time control, Nepomniachtchi leads by 4 games to 1 with 8 draws. Now, a couple of those wins took place when they were both juniors. Nevertheless, I think even those games actually count for something. I think it means that Nepomniachtchi just doesn't have that fear factor that other players have when they're playing Carlsen. He knows him incredibly well. In fact, they're good friends. They've worked together. So what are their strengths and weaknesses? Well, if we look at Carlsen's play, then he is brilliant at controlling play. He loves to gain the initiative, and he can kill counterplay of his opponents very well. So let's look at a game that I think shows that extremely well. So this was played in the Norway Chess Tournament in mid-September, and this is an Armageddon Blitz game. Now, in spite of the fast time limit, I think it still shows Carlsen's style very well. So in this position, Carlsen has sacrificed a pawn. So Carlsen with the black pieces. Now he sacrificed a pawn, but he has very good control in this position. You can see that these pawns here of Nepomniachtchi, they're not going anywhere. This bishop controls these squares beautifully. And now Carlsen sets in train a really nice initiative on the king side. This is what he likes. He loves to play and make sure that his opponent has no counterplay whatsoever. And it's very difficult for Nepomniachtchi to find a coherent plan here. So the bishop comes back. You can see that piece just controls squares on both sides of the board and can't be shifted. Knight d4, the knight is on a good square. However, Carlsen starts to roll those kingside pawns, and now he threatens to push again, and that's very embarrassing for the bishop. So g3 stops that pawn push, but now Carlsen just opens up the position, invades with the rook. Now that has to be countered. A rook exchange, and then rook number 2 enters on the open file. And, well, if Nepomniachtchi goes for a rook exchange, then he will lose a pawn here, and with 2 bishops against bishop and knight, that could be very good for black. So Nepo decides just to hold the position with rook d1, but now pawn to f4, and that opens up the position beautifully for those 2 bishops, and this is a really unpleasant position for white to defend. So now the rook invades. Now here, if white had more time, then perhaps you'd find a defense. It is still possible to defend this position with, let's say, rook to e1. And then this will exchange pieces, and the rook comes in, and, well, we've got a mass exchange of pawns there. White should be okay there. But to find that continuation when you're short of time is extremely difficult. And instead, Nepomniachtchi played a natural move. Bishop into the middle, defending that pawn. But now watch what happens. Bishop in, attacking the knight. And in fact, Carlsen now has a wonderful attack against white's king. You can see these pieces are so menacing. Nepomniachtchi gives up this pawn in order to take a pawn on the queen side. And now I think Carlsen's next move is really interesting, because the best move here is definitely to play king e4, drive that knight back, and then to keep attacking the king. And this threatens this, as well as, well, let's have a look at this. Bishop h3. I mean, this is just a winning move. If the rook moves here, then that's actually checkmate. Very unpleasant. But Carlsen loves clarity in a position. You know, when you're short of time, you don't want to deal with complications. And I suspect he saw potential knight forks here and thought, right, I'm just eliminating that knight. And then I'm going to move the king in very shortly like this, which also gives black a very powerful initiative. Still very difficult for white to defend this, but there are no complications. Typical Carlsen. And here, indeed, Nepomniachtchi goes wrong straight away with bishop here. And now this is a fatal switch. This is beautiful. So the rook attacks from this side of the board, forcing the king backwards. And now this is also a really light move, and the king can come in. Nepo gives up a pawn, but it doesn't matter. Rook check, king to f3, and now there's no decent defense to rook h1 mate. So this was the logical culmination of Carlsen's plays, being able to march his king in and to finally deliver checkmate against Nepomniachtchi's king. Well, that's Carlsen in full throw. But what about Nepomniachtchi? So what's he got going for him? Well, he very much likes to create positions where he can get chaos on the board when there's a real melee. And in those kind of positions, he's often better than Carlsen. Let's have a look at this game. So this was played in August 2020 in an online rapid game in the Legends of Chess final. And it starts out as a Najdorf variation. Carlsen playing quite boldly with black, you know. But here, this is interesting. Instead of one of the main lines, Nepomniachtchi goes for rook g1. So this is already an unusual move. So he's trying to get Carlsen on unfamiliar territory. And here, b5, g4. So we've got Nepo attacking straight away. g5, he's prepared to give up a pawn. And now just go for it. So he's pushed this pawn up the board, and now he starts to attack on the queen side. And this is interesting. After pawn to e5, of course, the knight is attacked. Normally one would move it back somewhere. But here, Nepo just gives up that piece. He just wants to go straight on. He's not putting on the brakes at all. He wants to go forward. And Carlsen's reaction here also very, very interesting. That he can take that piece, but that queen looks so menacing in the middle of the board. Attacks the bishop, looks in both directions, also threatening to take the pawn here. Well, Carlsen just doesn't want to spend the time to delve into that, and looks to keep a lid on all those complications. But here we go, rook g4. So Nepo is not afraid to play these kind of non-standard moves, attacking the bishop, bringing the rook into play. Carlsen takes on b5. There's a check. And bishop d2. This bishop is attacked, remember. Bishop comes back, and knight f5. So that in driving the bishop back, the knight has come to this superb attacking square. Carlsen's kingside. So Carlsen has managed to bring his king to safety, but, well, you can see that white is already very well set up for a kingside attack. So first of all, an exchange of rooks in the corner, and then rook h4. So the threat is clear. just to move the queen into attack. I mean, this is an absolutely crazy position, and it's incredible that Nepomniachtchi has managed to generate such a strong attack at such an early stage in the game. So Carlsen prevents the queen coming here, but the queen comes out anyway, and of course Nepo would like it very much if that were taken, because then the queen can come in here. So Carlsen plays knight c5 and queen h3. It's very direct play, just wants to take here. In fact, Carlsen is still okay in this position if he takes the pawn on g5, but actually establishing that there is any kind of defense here in this position would be miraculous when you're playing very short of time. This was a rapid play game. I won't bore you with the details, but there's kind of a miracle defense that black has in this variation. But instead, Carlsen played the normal move here, pawn to h5. But Nepo crashed through with the rook. And this is a completely winning position. So, for example, if the bishop comes here, then that can be taken. And even though black's queen comes over to defend, in fact, this is going to be a forced checkmate. So queen h4 check, and bishop f6 threatens a check here. And if the queen blocks, then knight e7 is mate. And in the game, Carlsen played here, but resigned anyway, because after g6, this just forces open lines, and it's checkmate very soon. So white wins back all the material and manages to get through to the king as well. Well, white's a piece up, and checkmate is happening very shortly as well. Let me go to the end. Why not? Here, that opens this diagonal, and then checkmate on g8. So that's the kind of thing that Nepomniachtchi would very much like to spring on Magnus. But, well, is that kind of a caricature of their styles? We have control against chaos. In fact, things are more nuanced. And Jan Nepomniachtchi has shown over the past couple of years that he plays far more responsibly now than he used to in his youth. He won the candidates, of course, in 2020, 2021, this elongated tournament, and he showed that he could be really patient and play some beautiful manoeuvring chess. He has excellent opening theory as well. He's far more inclined to play down long lines that he's rehearsed very well than Carlsen. Carlsen generally likes to arrive at positions where he feels comfortable, where he can try and control the play, a position that suits him, whereas Nepomniachtchi often will try to get a clear advantage with his excellent opening preparation. But yeah, their styles, I think, particularly with lots of opening preparation, will tend to even up a little bit in this match. So let's have a look at exactly what they're playing for. We can see that the prize fund is €2 million, and the winner will receive 60% of that. And if its match is tied, 55 to the winner and 45 to the loser. Let's look at the match rules. So it's a best of 14 classical games, and the time control is 2 hours, 40 moves. So 40 moves you have to play in the first 2 hours, and then 20 moves in the next hour. And only at move 61 will there be an increment, 30 seconds for each move they're played, and they get 15 minutes for the rest of the game as well. You'll notice there that I did mention the playoffs. I won't go into huge detail, but of course during the match, if that seems possible, then I'll go into detail. But let's just have a very quick look at the tie-break rules. I mean, we have had tie-breaks in the last 2 World Championship matches, so let's mention them. If it's 7-all after 14 games, there will be 4 rapid play games, 25 minutes each plus 10 seconds a move. And if it's still 2-all, if it's still even, they'll play blitz mini matches. But I'll go into more detail in later if that seems to be cropping up, if that seems likely. Okay, so let's look at the match schedule. That's very important. When exactly are they going to be playing? So here we go. 14 games starting on Friday. So you can see there are some days, well, they'll be playing 3 games in a row followed by a rest day. So the schedule is much tighter than it has been, for example, in the last World Championship match. Key thing is there are rest days on Mondays and Thursdays. That makes it much easier to remember. Rest days, Mondays and Thursdays. Now, how are you going to watch the match? Well, there are excellent commentary teams on various websites, but let me point out the Chess24 commentary teams. So let's go and have a look at that. There's the Oslo studio, hosted by well-known sports journalist Kaya Snara, and she's ably supported by David Howell from England and Ivanka Huska as well, and Simon Williams will be dropping in, and Tanya Sachdev also will be in Dubai. And there's also the commentary team, also on Chess24, of Judith Polgar, supported by Anish Giri. So if you want a deep dive into the position, then those are the ones. And yes, Tanya Sachdev will be there in Dubai interviewing the players and others in Dubai as well. And I will be giving daily recaps of the games. I'll try and produce them as soon as possible after the games are finished, but bear with me, it won't always be possible. It depends on the complexity of the game, of course. But anyway, look out for my daily recaps as well. It's going to be a fantastic match, and I hope you'll be there and watching it too.